Hey everyone, it's Dion with Blaze Coaching. Today we're talking about trail braking. We're going to go through what actually it is, why it's fast. Is trail braking right for you? Should you be trail braking? Should you not? So let's go ahead and get right into it. The first thing we want to cover, just so that we make sure we're on the same page, what actually is trail braking? Trail braking is when we combine braking and turning at the same time, aka it's when we turn into the corner and we continue to have some amount of brake pressure still engaged in the car. So I always want to start off with kind of the first main question that I get: is trail braking dangerous? Should I be trail braking? There's a big belief in sort of grassroots racing that we should teach amateur drivers or grassroots drivers to straight line brake first, because if we teach trail braking, they're going to end up in trouble. So the first and foremost to understand, trail braking in and of itself is not dangerous. In fact, if you go and ask professional race car drivers, is trail braking an important part of what they do? Is it fast and is it dangerous? 100% of those drivers, not 98%, not 99%, 100% of professional race car drivers say, A, trail braking is a critical skill to develop speed, and no, it is not dangerous when used correctly. If we teach it incorrectly, then yes, it can be dangerous, but the same can be said for anything. So at Blaze, we're big believers in teaching drivers from day one the right way to brake, that braking should happen and continue into the corner. That doesn't mean we have beginning drivers trail braking from day one. We teach them correctly, but the way to build up to trail braking is to let drivers know braking continues into corners. But what we're going to do to start off with is have you brake very early so that you don't need to continue braking past the turn-in point, that we can focus on where your initial throttle application comes, how the line should be. We get everything else working first, and you're going to coast. Coasting meaning you're going to come off the brakes, you're not going to accelerate, you're not going to brake, you're just going to let the car roll into the corner, accelerate and drive. And then as you get more comfortable, as your fundamentals improve, we are then going to shift our brake zone little by little deeper into the corner. And that's the way to set beginner drivers up for success. We're not teaching them incorrect technique and bad habits they have to undo. We set them up to understand what is trail braking. We're not doing it day one, but we're going to give you a picture of where we're going. We're going to focus on other fundamentals first. A big belief at Blaze is there are fundamentals to our sport, and there's a specific order in which we coach them. Trail braking is not the first fundamental. We need to first focus on minimum speed corner or the slow point in the corner, where we accelerate, lines, all of that type of stuff first, car positioning, and then we build up to it. So really important. Trail braking in of itself is not dangerous when done correctly, which is really braking early and then slowly building up into it. So on to the next point here. What is the goal of trail braking? There's really two major reasons why we want to trail brake. First and foremost, it's about direction. Trail braking is about getting the car to direct and point towards where we want it to go, to get the right angle at the apex point to maximize our corner exit. And then number two, it's about shifting the brake zone deeper into the corner. We're going to cover this one a little bit later on in more depth, but when you trail brake and continue to decelerate past the turn-in point, it allows you to also brake deeper into the corner, shift your initial brake zone deeper into the corner. So trail braking is about direction first and foremost, and then shifting the brake zone. So trail braking, the reason why we do it, the reason why we focus on it, is it comes back to weight transfer. And as race car drivers, we kind of always need to have a very firm grasp of what is weight transfer and how it works. And essentially, when we trail brake, we keep a little bit of weight, or we have brakes. And when we brake, the load and the weight shifts towards the front of the car, towards the front axle over the front wheels. And essentially where the weight goes is where the grip goes. So by trail braking, we keep a little bit more weight on the front tires, compresses and shoves those tires into the ground, and that generates more front grip relative to rear grip. This isn't black and white. This is something that is percentage based. So the more brake pressure you have, the more the weight is on the front axle. And that typically means the more relative front grip you have to the rear grip. Now, there are always exceptions to the rules. You can overload the front tires, and there's sometimes where trail braking can induce understeer. But for the most part, trail braking compresses that weight onto the front axle, shoves those tires in the ground, and gives us more front grip, gives us that direction, that rotation that we're looking for. So when I'm teaching trail braking, I kind of have a few step process. I want to change the name. I want you to think about change the name trail braking to directional braking, okay? Because it all comes down to direction. We never want to trail brake just to trail brake. A lot of drivers will say, well, I know that I'm supposed to be trail braking in turn 2, so I'm going to be trail braking in turn 2 because I know I'm supposed to be doing. The only thing we achieve by doing that is overslowing in the corner. So we need to build up our entry speed and trail brake only when we need to trail brake to get that rotation or to hit some other reference points. We're going to talk about in a sec. So when I'm teaching trail brake, and I kind of talked about this a little bit early on, the first step here is first to get off the brakes, to not trail brake, get to the turning point, get off the brakes, let the car roll speed. And only once you start missing apexes, not getting enough rotation so the car is not pointed where you need it to go at the apex point, or your slow point of the corner comes too late in the corner, that is when we start to introduce trail braking, because we're then using it as a tool to fix a problem. If you're not experiencing any of those three sensations and you're trail braking, you're likely doing it just because your nose is supposed to be doing it. And the only thing you're achieving then is overslowing corners. And that's not why we do it, right? First and foremost, it's to help the direction of the car. Okay. So once we have trail braking focused on really direction, and we've changed the thought in our mind and think about trail braking as a tool to help direction, that's why it's directional braking, there's other added benefits to doing this, right? And one of those added benefits will be talking about braking deeper. But before we get into braking deeper, it's important to know, well, like, how much brake pressure is trail braking? Should I be at threshold braking past the turning point? No. If you're at threshold braking past the turning point, that's where we get in trouble. So how much brake pressure should we be using past the turning point? It does depend a little bit on how far past the turning point. We're going to have a little bit more brake pressure the closer you get to the turning point. As you extend and get closer to the apex, you should be becoming less and less and less brake pressure. At the end, we're going to show a video of me driving in IMSA at around Sebring, and we're going to show you some different corners and how this works. But really, proper trail braking should almost just feel like your big toe is just sort of resting on the brake pedal. It's just a really light amount of brake pressure, keeping just a little bit of weight on the front nose to get that direction. That's what trail braking should feel like. And as you can see here in the image to your left-hand side, we sort of see, hey, as we brake deeper towards the apex, the percentage of brake pressure starts to release a little bit. What types of corners should we be trail braking into? Really, this one's going to depend a little bit on your car type, a little bit on the track itself, but typically the three main types of corners we're going to see trail braking, first and foremost, hairpins. And hairpins, those are the types of corners where we're actually going to see the deepest into the corner amount of trail braking. So the farther into the corner we trail brake is going to be typically in hairpin corners, because those are leading onto straightaways where we want more rotation. In sweeper style corners, not the super high speed corners, more medium flowing corners, those are ones where we want probably just a little bit of light brake pressure past the turning point, help you get a rotation, help you still bring in a little bit more speed. So in sweeper style corners, we're going to typically have a shorter trail brake and with less pressure than a hairpin. And hairpin, we're okay with more rotation. So we want more brake pressure and deeper into the corner. Sweepers, we want that lighter and shorter trail brake zone. Finally, in the double apex corners, typically past the first apex, which is going to be more of an entry speed corner, where the second apex is typically an exit speed corner. Double apex corners, we're typically trail braking past that first apex so that we can get the rotation to get the car pointed where we wanted to go in the second apex. The only normal type of corner that we're not going to have a trail break into are those really high speed corners. I'm not saying it never happens, but just generally in high speed corners, we want more rear security. So those are corners where we're going to have much less trail break, definitely less brake pressure, but typically also maybe little to no trail braking at all either in those higher speed corners. So other than high speed corners, in all three other types of corners, we're going to typically have some level of trail brake. So why does trail braking allow you to brake deeper? So over here on the right-hand side, we have some graphs that we want to kind of dive into here. So we've got GPS speed at the top. Let me just get my little annotation tool out. So GPS speed here, we've got brake pressure, and then we've got our steering trace. So if we look at the red lines, we can sort of see here that the red line, they are coming off the brakes before the turn-in point, where the black line continues to brake past the turn-in point. What I also want to highlight here is both cars end up with the same minimum speed. By trail braking, the black car can arrive at that minimum speed later in the corner. It can have more speed at the turn-in point while still achieving the same minimum speed by trail braking deeper into the corner. What that allows the car at this black line to do is allows that car to then brake deeper into the corner, right? By continuing to decelerate, it can brake deeper into the corner. It can have more speed at the turn-in point while still reaching the same minimum speed. So trail braking typically isn't about having a higher minimum speed through the corner, although it can help that. It more allows a driver to have more speed from the turn-in point or around the turn-in point down to the apex and shift that minimum speed later into the corner. We often see drivers have what we call a flat bottom on their speed trace. If you look at this red lap here, notice how long they spend at that minimum speed area. This is kind of a very common problem in grassroots racing, and that's typically stemming from a lack of entry speed and being under the limit at the turn-in point. And a lot of that is due to not braking, not being at the limit, not being able to trail brake, or sometimes they'll see that if they trail brake, just to trail brake, and then they overslow the entry of the corner. So trail braking is all about allowing you to roll in more speed past the turn-in point, but still get the car rotated, still get it down to the apex, still hit your minimum speed and get out of there. And that's why it allows you to brake deeper into the corner as well. Okay. So what we want to do here is let's flip over to some video, and this is going to be on board with me around Sebring. And what we're going to highlight here is a couple different things. We're going to show you a little bit of the trail brake difference from turn 1 at Sebring, which is a pretty high speed corner, turn 3 at Sebring, which is a little bit more of that sweeper corner, and then turn 7 at Sebring, which is that hairpin. You're going to see how the distance of how far into the corner I trail brake changes, and how much brake pressure I have in the corner changes as well. So going right away, as we come into this corner here, we're going to highlight into turn 1. Here we go. At the turn-in point, where I want your eyes focused is our little brake pressure graph here. So you can kind of see here at the turn-in point, right around the end of the B is where my brake pressure is. As I start to turn in, I've immediately started to come off, right? So as my hands turn in, my foot's starting to release off the brake pressure. And then what you can see here is not a lot of brake pressure. You're going to see the difference as we look at turn 7, especially at how much brake pressure I've got. And then notice I am off the brakes here. So I'm not trail braking all the way down to the apex point. Remember when we talked about sweeper corners, how I said we have typically less brake pressure and a shorter trail brake in these types of corners? That's what I'm doing here. On a good lap, if I were to analyze my own driving here, I would have liked to have seen me trail brake or need to trail brake a little deeper into the corner. I could see this and say instinctually, hey, I've overslowed corner entry a little bit. But notice I didn't just trail brake to trail brake in here. I got off the brakes as soon as I could to continue to roll in more speed. But now I know, hey, I could probably brake a little bit deeper. I can probably get off a little bit of peak brake pressure earlier in this brake. So that I trail brake a little bit deeper into the corner, but I'm not trail braking deeper into turn 1 just because I know I'm supposed to. I'm using it as a directional tool. Once I got the car pointed to where I needed it to go, then I was good to go. Okay. So then moving farther forward here, let's go take a look at turn 3. Turn 3 is going to be a little bit slower, a little bit more of a sweeper type corner. So as we approach our turn 3 brake zone, we're braking for turn 3 here. Notice at the turn-in point, how much faster I released off the brake pressure at the turn-in point. So here, right now, again, look at that brake pressure, much quicker release here. But then what you're going to see is I have that last little bit of brake pressure for much longer into this brake zone. Remember how I said it's like your big toe is just resting on the brake pedal? You can barely see that brake pressure light still on here, but it is. And I'm holding that a lot longer into this corner. Why am I holding the brake pressure longer to turn 3? Because I really need the car to rotate more. I need to hold the car mid-track at corner exit. If we play this farther forward, right? I need to hold the car mid-track here so I can set up for turn 4. So I need more rotation in turn 3. And that's why I'm trail braking deeper into the corner. Turn 1, it's a more open radius. I don't need as much rotation. Speed's more important, so I don't trail brake as deep. Turn 3, I'm trail braking much deeper into the corner. I'm trail braking almost all the way down to the apex, but with very little brake pressure. Okay, now what we're going to do is let's let it play down to the turn 7 brake zone. Turn 7 is a hairpin style corner that leads onto a long straightaway here at Sebring. So notice how I'm going to adjust my trail braking technique here relative to what you just saw in turn 1 and turn 3. So we're down into the turn 7 brake zone, threshold braking, threshold braking, threshold braking. Now what you can see here is at the turn-in point, I've got a decent amount of brake pressure. And then look at the difference here is as I'm turning it down, it may not look like a lot, but that's almost double to triple the amount of brake pressure after the turn point than I had at turn 1. Than I had at turn 3. So a lot more brake pressure. And I continue to hold that brake pressure deeper into the corner. The final little bit as the car rotates, that's where I get super light here. But notice again, this is a corner where I am trail braking the deepest into. This is a corner where I want the most rotation. So I have the longest amount of trail brake and the shortest distance in between our brakes and throttle. So notice here, I'm coming off the brakes finally now, and then I wait just probably a half car length before I start to accelerate. So just a very short distance between where I brake and where I come to throttle. But there is some distance. Now, if we go back to turn 3, let's look at the distance between where I brake and where I get back to throttle. So coming in, I'm coming off the brakes. I'm off the brakes right now. And I'm going to wait, I'm going to wait, I'm going to wait, I'm going to wait, and now I get back to throttle. So we had about a half car length distance in turn 7. We had about a car length and a half distance in turn 3. So a longer distance from where I come off the throttle to where I get back to the brakes. If we go back to turn 1, it's got by far the longest distance in between the brakes and throttle. I'm off the brakes now, and I'm 1 car length, 2 car lengths, about 2.5 car lengths or so between where I come off the brakes and where I get to throttle. So you see, coasting is a very integral part of this. If I'm teaching a beginner level driver to start to learn how to trail brake, I want them to know, hey, eventually in turn 1, I want you trail braking till about here. We're not doing that today. What I first want you to do is brake early, brake before the bridge. I want you off the brakes by the turning point. I don't want you to coast. I want your minimum speed coming here. I want your acceleration point coming as you come under the 100 board and really driving it on out. And then what you're going to do is you're over slowing the corner entry. You're very conservative corner entry. And then as you get more competent as a driver, we're going to slowly shift your brake zone a little bit deeper, so that as you get to the turning point, you're not immediately trail braking with as much pressure as I am. You might be trail braking with 5%. And you're going to see, how does that feel? Comfortable? Okay, let's brake a little bit deeper and have a little bit more brake pressure past the turning point. And that's how you slowly build up to trail braking. That's how I would coach it as well. So that's been our sort of quick masterclass here on trail braking. What is trail braking? It's having a little bit of brake pressure past the turning point. When do we trail brake? In almost any car, if you need that direction. Trail braking, start to call it directional braking. It'll reframe it in your mind. You're not trail braking just because you think you need to, because all that does is overslow the car. You're trail braking because you need the direction change, and it allows you to brake deeper into the corner. If we could do anything to help, reach out to our team at Blaze. We'd love to help you learn how to become a better trail braking driver or really improve any technique. So no matter what car you drive, on what track, or what your goals are, our team of coaches can work one-on-one with you using your onboard video and or data, just like you saw there. Best of luck. Hope you go fast, and we can't wait to see you on track soon.